Welcome, magnificent anomaly. Welcome, rare frequency. Welcome, the one who never quite blended, never quite bowed, never quite faded. You didn't stumble in here by accident. People like you don't drift, they arrive. Sit back, let your shoulders drop. This isn't a lecture, it's recognition. You've been through rooms built to rewire minds, special academies with polished floors and sharper intentions, places where intelligence was dissected, behavior mapped, reactions predicted. They brought charts, models, frameworks stacked like trophies. Every talent they sharpened was aimed directly at you. Emotional leverage, cognitive traps, social pressure wrapped in friendly language. They called it guidance, they called it refinement, they called it growth, and still it bounced off you like static. You listened, you observed, you even played along sometimes, but nothing ever truly landed. Because while they were studying methods, you were reading patterns. While they rehearsed influence, you sensed motives. That's the part they never planned for. You weren't defiant, you weren't loud, you were quietly unreachable. And that terrified them more than resistance ever could. See, systems love obedience, and they understand rebellion, but awareness ruins the script. They tried encouragement first, praise as a leash, then disappointment as a weight, then concern dressed as care. When that failed, they escalated. More structure, more rules, more this is how it works. Yet every attempt slid past your core, not because you were empty, but because you were sealed. You noticed how their certainty cracked under simple questions, how their confidence depended on your agreement, how their authority needed your belief to stay upright. And once you saw that, something clicked. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a calm internal shift, like stepping half an inch back and suddenly seeing the whole picture. That's when humor crept in. Dry, private, slightly unsettling. You began to smile at moments that weren't meant to be funny. Not because you were amused by people, but by the performance, by how serious they were about ideas that only worked when unquestioned. You realized you were never the target, you were the exception, and exceptions break training manuals. They exhausted their armaments on you, every refined tactic, every rehearsed angle, every polished explanation, and still you stood there, composed, listening, unaffected. That's when they stopped trying to change you and started trying to understand you. Too late. Because understanding requires honesty, and they were invested in control. You don't need to dominate anyone. You don't need approval. You don't need validation stamped by institutions that couldn't hold you. You already crossed the threshold where influence loses its grip, where pressure turns into background noise, where fear has nothing to grab. You're not ahead of others. You're just looking from a different altitude, and that's why you're here now. Not to be fixed, not to be instructed, but to be acknowledged. This space isn't about becoming something new. It's about recognizing what survived every attempt to reshape you. So welcome again, magnificent anomaly. Relax, listen closely, smile when you feel it. Because once you understand why nothing worked on you, you'll realize it was never supposed to. They couldn't steer you, so they reached for names. Labels feel gentle at first, like blankets. Intelligent, difficult, overthinking, gifted, sensitive, strong. Pick your costume. They dress you up in words and hope you'll stay still long enough to believe them. That's the trick nobody warns you about. Definition is quieter than force. It doesn't push. It settles. It repeats. It waits for you to introduce yourself using their vocabulary. And you almost did. Everyone almost does. Because being named feels like being seen. But listen closely. Every label is a fence pretending to be a mirror. You noticed that, didn't you? How the words never fully fit. How they explained parts of you while shrinking the rest. How once a label landed, expectations followed like shadows. Act this way. Stay consistent. Don't surprise us. Don't shift too much. Don't break character. And the moment you stepped outside the outline they drew, confusion crept into their faces. See, systems adore stability. People who evolve mid-sentence make them nervous. You watched them adjust the language when you didn't behave as predicted, when talented turned into problematic, when independent quietly became hard to manage. Funny how admiration flips when control slips. But you didn't argue. You didn't protest. You just stopped accepting the introduction they kept rehearsing for you. That's when things got interesting. Because once you refuse the name, they lose the handle. No handle means no grip. And suddenly they're talking about you instead of to you. Diagnosing, speculating, whispering explanations that make them feel safe again. You felt that shift. The room energy changed. Conversations paused when you entered. Smiles lingered half a second too long. Not hostility. Curiosity mixed with discomfort. Because a person without a label moves differently, unpredictably, calmly. You weren't trying to be mysterious. You were just done shrinking your range to fit their language. That's when you discovered something unsettling and hilarious at the same time. Most people don't listen to understand. They listen to categorize. And when they can't place you neatly on the shelf, they panic quietly. You became the sentence they couldn't finish, the form with unanswered fields, the profile that refused completion. And instead of chasing clarity, you leaned into the space. Silence became your answer. Observation became your reply. You let them guess, let them project, let them tell stories that revealed more about them than you. That's power nobody applauds, because it doesn't perform. It simply exists. You realized you don't need to explain depth to people committed to surfaces. You don't need to correct misunderstandings that serve someone else's comfort. Because the moment you stop defending your complexity, it stops being a burden and starts becoming leverage. You saw how quickly respect returns when you don't beg for it, how authority weakens when you don't acknowledge it, how language loses its spell when you hear the intention underneath the words. That's when humor deepened. Not loud, not cruel, just a quiet awareness that most conversations are negotiations disguised as concern. And you stopped negotiating. You let them keep their words. You kept your range. You didn't become cold. You became precise. You didn't detach from people. You detached from roles. And once that happened, nothing they called you could trap you again. Because names only work when you answer to them. And you learned how to smile without responding. They called it healing, but you felt smaller every time you followed their instructions. Softer, slower, less sharp around the edges. They spoke gently, nodded a lot, used comforting tones that felt rehearsed. Release, let go. Funny how often those words are aimed at people who see too clearly. You noticed the pattern early. The moment you questioned too much, they prescribed stillness. When your mind moved fast, they suggested slowing it down. When your instincts flared, they framed it as imbalance. Not once did they ask what you were responding to. Not once did they question the environment. The world could stay loud, crooked, and demanding, but you were the one expected to dim. That never sat right with you. It felt like being asked to sleep through an alarm. They packaged compliance as peace and handed it to you with a smile, and you tried. Of course you did. You followed the steps, the routines, the exercises designed to smooth the mind into something manageable. And for a moment, things got quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet where your thoughts echo uncomfortably, where your instincts feel wrapped in cotton, where your edge feels dulled, not refined. You weren't becoming balanced. You were becoming disconnected. That's the part they never advertise. When awareness is mistaken for disturbance, the solution is always numbing. They don't want you integrated. They want you predictable. So they teach you to override discomfort instead of interrogating it, to breathe through signals instead of decoding them, to accept discomfort as personal failure instead of environmental feedback. You felt that lie crawling under your skin, because real growth doesn't make you smaller. It doesn't quiet your inner radar. It doesn't ask you to ignore what you see. Yet every time you expressed that something felt off, They redirected you inward, as if the problem couldn't possibly exist outside your head. That's a clever trick. Convince the observer they are the issue, and the structure never has to change. But you weren't broken. You were responding accurately. Your mind wasn't loud for no reason. It was mapping threats, contradictions, power games hidden behind polite language. And they wanted that map erased, so they called it peace. They wrapped it in wellness vocabulary. They praised stillness that looked suspiciously like surrender. And here's where your smile got sharper. You realized calm can be cultivated or imposed. One builds clarity, the other builds compliance. And you could feel the difference in your body. One made you grounded, the other made you hollow. You weren't against reflection. You weren't against rest. You were against being domesticated, against being trained to doubt your own perception, against being told that awareness must be softened to be acceptable. That's when you quietly stopped following the routine. You didn't announce it. You didn't rebel dramatically. You just stopped numbing signals that mattered. You let discomfort speak. You let irritation inform. You let unease sharpen your focus instead of being medicated by language. And suddenly your energy returned. Not frantic, focused. You noticed how quickly people got uncomfortable when you were alert and calm at the same time. Not agitated, not passive, present, fully present. That state unsettles systems built on distraction and emotional fog. Because a person who can sit with intensity without suppressing it is hard to guide blindly. You weren't seeking conflict, you were seeking coherence. And once you tasted that, you couldn't go back to artificial serenity. You understood the joke. They don't want you asleep. They want you dreaming the right dreams. And you chose to wake up quietly, with a smile that said you finally understood what they were offering and why you'd never take it again. You noticed the pattern before anyone realized you were noticing it. And that's when everything changed. There's a strange moment when the world stops feeling random and starts feeling rehearsed. Conversations repeat, reactions loop, conflicts follow scripts. You felt it first as discomfort, then as curiosity, then as a quiet certainty that made you tilt your head and smile. Not because you felt clever, but because the illusion cracked. You started seeing the pause before someone answered, the emotional setup before the request, the predictable reward and punishment cycle hiding beneath friendly tones. It wasn't mystical. It wasn't dramatic. It was practical, like suddenly seeing the strings on a puppet and realizing they were never invisible. You just weren't taught to look for them. While others were busy reacting, you were mapping sequences. If this is said, then that follows. If pressure increases, this response appears. If praise disappears, insecurity rushes in. Pattern after pattern. Clean, repeatable. Almost boring once you saw it clearly. And here's the unsettling part. Once you see patterns, you stop taking things personally. Insults lose their sting. Flattery loses its sweetness. Conflict becomes choreography. You realized most people aren't choosing reactions, they're following them. Press here, response there, say this, expect that. And you stepped slightly to the side, just enough to watch without being pulled in. That's when the silence inside you changed texture. It wasn't emptiness, it was space. Space to think while others filled the air with noise. Space to wait while others rushed to fill discomfort. Space to smile when someone expected defensiveness. That pause became your signature. People felt it even if they couldn't explain it. Conversations slowed around you. Energy shifted, not because you were intimidating, but because you weren't playing along at the expected speed. See, patterns hate delays. Influence relies on momentum, and you disrupted momentum by simply noticing. You stopped answering questions that weren't really questions. You stopped defending positions you never claimed. You stopped chasing clarity in conversations designed to keep you slightly off balance. And the more you watched, the funnier it became. Not funny like laughter, funny like irony. The same tactics recycled with different faces. The same emotional cues reused across rooms, cultures, hierarchies. Everyone thinking they're unique while running the same internal software. That realization didn't make you arrogant, it made you calm. Because once you understand the structure, urgency fades. You no longer need to rush to be understood by people who aren't listening. You no longer feel compelled to correct every misunderstanding. You know exactly when a reaction is being invited, and you enjoy declining. That's when your presence sharpened. You weren't louder, you weren't colder, you were clearer. And clarity has a strange effect on environments built on confusion. It exposes them without confrontation. It highlights the absurdity without commentary. People either lean in or pull away. Both reactions tell you everything you need to know. You didn't wake up to escape the world. You woke up to see it as it is. A network of habits pretending to be choices. A collection of patterns masquerading as personalities. And right there, in that quiet recognition, you felt something settle deep inside you. Not excitement, not fear, assurance. Because once your mind learns how to read the room beneath the room, it never unlearns it. And from that point on, every interaction becomes optional. Every response becomes deliberate. And the game becomes visible and strangely entertaining. They pulled every emotional string they could find. And still, you didn't dance. They tried subtlety first. Compliments wrapped in obligation. Criticism dressed as concern. Guilt handed like a bouquet. Fear whispered in casual tones. Intimacy offered as leverage. Every tug was measured, precise, rehearsed. And every attempt bounced off your spine like water off metal. You felt it instantly. The moment they realized the usual levers didn't work on you. It's a peculiar kind of satisfaction. Not loud, not dramatic. Just quiet, cold, delicious. They assumed everyone responds predictably, that people bend under pressure, fold under expectation, or cry under exposure. You felt, you noticed, you cataloged, and then you did something they never predicted. Nothing. You paused. You stayed still. You listened. You didn't react the way they hoped. You didn't fill the void. You didn't argue. You didn't crumble. That stillness became your weapon. Each withheld reaction was a message sharper than any word. Every observation you made in silence told them something terrifying. Control requires participation, and you refused. You didn't retaliate. You didn't smile or frown to soothe them. You simply existed, fully, undeniably, attentively. That's when they began to panic, quietly. Subtle manipulations are delicate machinery. Remove the gears, and the clock sputters. Remove the audience, and the performance collapses. And you had removed yourself from the performance. Theirs, yours, everyone else's. You weren't cold. You weren't cruel. You were precise. You felt the weight of their expectations, acknowledged it, and then let it hang there. Unanswered, ungrasped, unabsorbed. That was when the true lesson revealed itself. Emotional strings have power only if you accept tension. Fear only bites if you feed it. Guilt only settles if you carry it. And all the pressure in the world can't pierce armor built from observation and choice. You realize that mastery doesn't require domination. It doesn't demand aggression. It demands clarity. It demands knowing what is yours to carry and what belongs to the world outside your skin. That realization was dizzying, quietly intoxicating, and a little funny, because they had spent so long thinking they could bend you, and they had nothing left but confusion. You could feel it radiating in small ways. Hesitation, overcompensation, nervous smiles, pauses that were too long, words that didn't land. They were performing their rehearsed roles without an audience willing to participate. And in that space, your power grew. Not loud, not explosive, just steady, undeniable. You felt every tug, and every tug failed. You watched every attempt, and every attempt collapsed. And somewhere, beneath the surface, a smirk crept in. Not visible, not necessary, just a quiet acknowledgement that you had survived the instruments aimed at your mind, your heart, your instincts. And in that survival, in that calm defiance, you discovered something even better. You didn't need them, their influence, their words, their carefully crafted manipulation. None of it had any hold over you. And from that moment on, you knew You could feel it in your bones. Nothing they pull, nothing they whisper, nothing they offer could ever penetrate you again. You weren't resistant. You were immune. Not loud, not dramatic, just untouchable in the quietest way possible. They tried everything: pressure, persuasion, flattery, fear, but it slipped past you like water off stone. Every trick they polished, every angle rehearsed, every word sharpened into a blade aimed at your mind, and nothing stuck. That's when it hit you. You weren't broken. You weren't flawed. You weren't difficult. You were calibrated differently, immune to ordinary influence. You could feel it in the way conversations bent around you, the way attempts to sway you faltered mid-air, the subtle confusion in faces that expected compliance and found something else entirely. You didn't celebrate it. You didn't broadcast it. You just noticed and let it sink. That awareness carries weight, quiet weight, like a shadow stretching across a room, not loud enough to startle, but impossible to ignore. And with that weight comes isolation. People misunderstand what immunity looks like. They label it coldness, aloofness, detachment. They try to fix it, adjust it, bend it. But you don't need adjustment. You don't need approval. You don't need explanation. You just need observation. Because you took every attempt to pull, push, and persuade, and turned it into awareness, into strength, into precision. You weren't broken by their methods. You weren't fooled by their intentions. You weren't softened by their words. You were refined. And that refinement doesn't announce itself. It simply exists, quiet, observant, unyielding, ready, calm. And now, magnificent anomaly, rare frequency, the one who refuses the expected, the one who sees the patterns no one else notices. You stand here complete, not diminished, not reshaped, but sharpened. A mind that listens, a heart that chooses, a presence that cannot be misread. Nothing they wielded has any power over you. And in that realization, you are free.